All right, guys, so welcome to today's program. Today, I want to talk about something totally different. I want to talk about learning difficulties. I feel like we don't talk about this particular issue a lot in Nigeria. I feel like what made me actually begin to think about doing something on this is that one of my students actually asked me a question. Why is it that Nigerian teachers believe that every student who is not doing well, that it is actually the fault of the students? I actually thought about it and I didn't have any answer to that because I don't know about other places, but I'm just talking generally from my own personal experience because I've come to notice that we have a lot of children that have either learning disabilities or learning difficulties. And it takes a conscious society to start working towards it. It was until of recent that I did a program that I found out that Lagos State has a special place where you have this sort of students being sent to, or then they have professionals too that handle this sort of cases. But over a long period of time, I've not necessarily had an encounter with maybe in a school setting where we have a department that handles this sort of thing. So I decided to talk about it. So I started making researches. Obviously, I've actually been interested in teaching the tougher students, students that are known to be maybe so many people have given up on, or people are finding it difficult to, uh, to teach. So I always feel challenged with this sort of students because I always try to understand them the more. Sometimes many times rather, I've been very lucky to find what clicks for every child or the children that have handled. But then there are some other times where you just try everything you can for a particular child and it's still proving very difficult. So it made me question, are we really neglecting an important aspect? Are schools supposed to have set up maybe have specialists in every school that handles this stuff? Children, where do they go? Because I've been arguing with a lot of colleagues. If schools are only taking the best, now who will take the worst of us, and who will bring them up to become the best? Because these students, there are some students that have had track record of actually being underperformers, but with consistency and people that have been patient enough with them, they turned out to be one of the best in their category. Now, when they have become the best, schools now watch them, especially maybe setting up entrance exams, always taking the best and flushing out the worst of them. The question is this: where do they go to? Who will now be patient enough to bring them up to speed? These are ambiguous, or these are so many things to digest at the same time. Some people have attention deficit disorders, which a lot of us in Africa, so many things we don't believe Africans go through, especially Nigerians. We feel like we are coconut heads. So we feel like this is not our thing. So there's no need. You can't classify me as somebody who has a learning difficulty, like attention deficit disorder. It's just me not being serious with my life. Why sometimes it's a real medical issue that should need a medical attention or a specialist attention. Also, some people are autistic. There are different variants of the spectrum. I've come across so many students that need help in one way or the other, but because a lot of us we are not exposed to these sort of things, we really can't tell what the child is going through until somebody who knows better comes along. I think teachers should actually have workshops on issues like this, know how to identify students with learning difficulties, know how to identify students with learning disabilities, how best to attend to them. I think that should be one of the basic skills of every teacher, just like having the basic skill of first aid, how to give first aid in terms of emergency. Uh, the whole plan is the first aid is just a temporary treatment before the person is taken to the hospital. Now, every teacher should have a skill in managing students, special students, so that you can actually manage the occasion or the situation until the child is not taken to a specialist where the rest of the work will be done. So I feel like we are neglecting this special aspect of our education, and then we believe that it is every student's fault that didn't perform very well. Like I mentioned, some people could be on the spectrum of autism. There are different spectrum, and they can give rise to so many behavioral abnormalities or anomalies. You also have some people that are dyslexic. All right, you have some children seeing things in a funny way. Then there are people that their brains are wired totally different from the others. They learn in a totally different way from how their mates do. So, but because these sort of things are not seen as issues, or they are issues, but we don't have a wide array of information on them. And some people could even be saying, what is this guy saying? We know learning difficulties, we know learning disabilities, but the question is, everybody, do we all know? Because this is a very important part of education. If education must be inclusive, then we must create room for everybody to thrive, no matter how we learn. All right. And for them to thrive with the way they learn, we must give them that enabling environment, providing specialists or providing people that have the knowledge on how best to teach them. And I think, just like I mentioned earlier, I think I'm repeating myself now, every teacher should have little knowledge, at least, on how to handle students or identifying students with learning difficulties and learning disabilities, so that at least you can be managing the situation or the moment until a specialist is called to help. A lot of the students that we handle, that we graded as unserious, could be simple, maybe something simple that they need, or in one form of help or the other. But because a lot of us are not skilled to handle these sort of issues, we now pass the blame on the students or the pupils, that they are not taking their studies seriously, while their condition is overwhelming them, and we are adding up to their problems. The Nigerian system of education, except for the few privileged ones, is very bulky in theory and little attention to practical. If you are doubting this, look at your timetable. How many periods is allotted to practicals? Especially if you're a science teacher, you know the stress you go through just to have your practical time. Sometimes it could be on a Saturday when you're supposed to have your rest, and then you just have to sacrifice that moment for the sake of your students. It could be a time that you don't have a period or anything, and you just keep chasing the students around, or trying to struggling with the management to fix something for you, even if it means in your most inconvenient time. So I think a lot of things should be considered, because some children learn by hands-on. All right, they build based on their interaction with their environment. They kind of generate their own knowledge from there, just by exposure to this environment. And even if you like speak in tongues in class and there is no practical aspect of it, there are certain children or students that will never pick it. Just like I used to tell them, we used to classify students based on audio visual, and then hands-on. The end point is this: for inclusivity, every learner must be put into consideration. And I'm being specific here in the aspect of learning difficulties and learning disabilities. The guidance counselors are there. I'm very particular about child psychology, because if this aspect is not handled properly, then the rest of the things that we do in class it amounts to nothing. It is a child who is psychologically ready for a class, that will be attentive in class and at least grasp, if not all, but most of the things that they are doing in class. But a student who is psychologically thrown off, there is nothing that you are doing in that class that will amount to anything. So if a student who has some form of learning disability feels not being understood by the management or even by their parents, sometimes parents don't even know their children have this. All right. So, and again, I think there is this mentality in Nigeria that we don't believe in seeing a psychologist, or visiting the hospital for no just cause, like maybe for prophylactic sake. They always ask you, are you sick? So they don't see the need of you going for routine checkup or anything. Talk more of knowing when a child is struggling mentally. All right. And how many children do we have any data on the number of children that have been detected to have dyslexia in Nigeria? This is me. I could be speaking out of ignorance, but this is me genuinely seeking knowledge. Somebody could point me out to it. Do we have institutions, well-known institutions with specialists, or well-known organizations that their main aim is on children with some form of disabilities? in terms of learning? You know, is this what is the percentage spread like all over the country? Or is it just a one-centered thing? Or is it spread like I don't know if somebody is getting what I'm saying. I feel we are neglecting a certain group of people and we are classifying all the students under our care in the same box. But like I said, only a privileged few are able to have specialists or schools that are standardized enough to actually have specialists to figure out the problems, the psychological problems of each child. But this should be something that is obtainable in all schools, no matter the location, even in the most remote part of the country. So I'm actually advocating at this point. Every child that struggles in your class is not unserious. They could be giving in their 100% best. It could be two things. It could be a case that is beyond his control, maybe something like a learning difficulty or learning disability, or it could be that at that point he has not understood his learning style, and it is not left for you, the expert, to guide the child on how best to learn. But in a case where it is learning difficulties, learning disabilities, then we need the help of specialists. I don't know how big or in number or the number of specialists we have focused in this area, but I feel is somewhere that the government can invest in so that we don't lose that because this group of students are always one of the smartest set of students you can get when you get it right with them. They are so outstandingly smart, brilliant. But then when you don't get it with them, we are simply trying to scoop the ocean with a teaspoon. So that is just it for me on this particular episode. I hope that I have spoken the mind of many educators. There should be more time for science teachers to have their practicals. It should be standardized in the timetable and even the curriculum planning. I don't know. And also there should be a deep research, a very deep research in learning difficulties and learning disabilities in Nigerian students. They are not all Olodo, and it is not always their fault. It could be something beyond their control that needs the attention of an expert to help out this child to become the best he can be in the best of environments. Thank you so much for today, and I hope to see you in my next episode. Keep in touch with us in all our social media platforms and stay blessed.